Hi, I'm Paul Scholes and you're watching Stretty News TV.
Hello and welcome to Stretty News TV. I'm with Henry Winter of the Telegraph. Henry, we have to start this season recap with, I suppose, talking about Chelsea. Worthy champions, I think there's no question about that. Have you made their season?
Worthy champions. I thought that they would be at the start of the season because of Mourinho. He was on a mission. Unlike most of the other clubs in the Premier League, they actually targeted players they really needed. They spent quickly, they spent big, they got them in, and it's transpired. You saw the way they started. They played attractive football towards the start of the season, and then Mourinho, the master strategist, is very good at nicking the points just to get them over the line.
Going into next season, obviously United want to challenge more. Can they learn from Chelsea in terms of getting their business done quick? They look to be doing that right now, also with almost announcing Memphis to play.
Well, Memphis Depay is a fantastic signing. I mean, he's brilliant. I mean, if you look at the Manchester United squad, it's too heavy with left-footed players. Whereas Depay will bring some sort of balance to that. He'll give them more width down the right. A lot of United's width this season has come from sort of Young on the left. So I think that's good. But if you're going to learn from one thing from Chelsea is balance of the squad. And depth of the squad, and the balance of Chelsea's squad is far superior to Manchester United. Manchester United have some fantastic players in there, but it's not an even squad.
From a journalistic perspective, what was it like working with Louis van Gaal this year?
I mean, I'm a football correspondent, so I don't go to every press conference. We've got Mark Ogden, who you know, who's brilliant with Manchester United news stories, press conferences. I'll obviously come up and do all the major matches. I've probably seen United about 25 times this season in Europe and domestically. In terms of you weren't in Europe, actually, were you? Sorry. I've got Moyes on the brain there. So I've probably seen Manchester United about 25 times in the Premier League, and also places like MK Dons and Cambridge United. And looking at Van Gaal in those places, what the Dutch journalist had warned us when he arrived, he said he won't appreciate the intensity and the depth of English football. He won't realise that when you go to, as it transpired, an MK Dons or a Cambridge United, that they're all ambushes, which is why we love English football, because it's just so exciting, because that's the sort of the beauty of the cup, that they can be these ambushes. And it was interesting looking at Van Gaal at MK Dons when they got absolutely hammered, and at the Abbey Stadium, obviously brought them back here. He just looked surprised, and listening to him afterwards, I thought it was interesting. And then eventually I got to interview him. I spent an hour with him at the training ground. Just the two of us were just talking about because I followed his career a long time. I was in Vienna when his Ajax team won there in '95. So I've followed his career, and actually, what's impressed me is how he's changed during the season. Not in his reaction to journalists. I'm not really bothered. I mean, the great man there was very rude to journalists, and he's one of the greatest managers that's ever paced the dugout. But no, just the way he's changed, the way he's adapted to English football, realising that every second of every game there lurks a danger, which wouldn't have happened in Holland and some other countries if he played in the cup. You wouldn't get a Cambridge United when the locals are almost sort of running after your coach with pitchforks just to sort of give you that sort of reception. In terms of, in a way, I think he's the perfect manager for Manchester United at the moment, because he has this experience, because he has this aura. And we talked to a lot of the players, particularly the English players, and I've talked to Herrera at length earlier in the season. And their respect for Van Gaal just reminds me as a journalist, as an outsider, that the club is in good hands. It's his last job. He's very aware of his legacy in the game. Can he be considered one of the greatest managers of the modern era? So he's got that hunger to do well here. He will get it right. He will have an impact. He will make good players better. You've seen it with one of the two of the United players already, Ashley Young in particular. And just talking to players, you talk to Rooney on the record and off the record. Rooney just responds to Van Gaal, partly because of his personality, but also this aura. Just seriously, the guy's aura is huge. So I always thought maybe it's a particularly Manchester United thing, because the great managers you've had here, Busby, Ferguson, and now Van Gaal, you just think, what effect are they going to have on the players in the dressing room? And even as an outsider, as a journalist, spending a bit of time in his company, you just thought, he has serious presence. And what I liked as well, it's not all about the emotion. It's not all about philosophy. It's about how meticulous he is. And he said to me, I said, "How long have you got?" He said, "I have." I think he said 52 minutes, but I need to leave here at 3 minutes to 4 because I have to be back in my office. It takes me 2 minutes to walk there, and I have 1 minute to prepare myself for the next person I'm talking to, some sponsorship meeting or whatever." So, you know, he has got that Mourinho running things by clockwork. And then he sort of talked through the amount of, he says, you know, we don't just turn up and play these teams, we go through the preparation. So in that very intellectual Dutch way, he talked me through all the preparation that all his scouts did, making clips for the players, making sure that everyone knew their jobs. Now, a lot of times this season, particularly looking at United's defence, not all the players have known their jobs. But when he gets his players in and he imposes his philosophy on them, United will respond, and as United will always do, they'll go chasing the major honours again. But the first thing he said, and I remember his programme notes, and it's echoed throughout the season, he basically said, when I go into Carrington and I see players, I want them to play with their brains, with their heads, as well as with their hearts. And he talked about it at length, about this is basically an English problem. You know, you look at Rooney, you look at Gerrard, they're sort of emotional, visceral, raw power players, as much as intelligent players like some of the, you know, like a Van Persie, the sort of more clinical, mathematical approach to football. So I think he's mixing that, and I think maybe he could have the ultimate blend of this sort of English emotion, this raw power, let's do it, as well as a sort of more intellectual, chess-like approach, which we associate with Dutch players.
Of course, this season, United fans have a lot to thank to that day. A lot of points would have been lost if it wasn't for him. And start of the season, I suppose a lot of things were said about the defence, injuries here and there, and I spoke to Gary Neville at length about players getting their break. You need a season or two of no injuries to get your break and to cement that position in the team. It looks like he's going to be leaving. It does. It looks like he's on his way. He's gone. And next season, do United look at really strengthening the defence? Or is it going to have a replacement, or to stick with Valdez? What's the priority for to improve next season?
It's very simple. You have to get on the phone to Daniel Levy, and I know it's normally quite difficult, and he probably leaves it until the last moment, and try and get the best, well, the next best goalkeeper in the country on the basis you're not going to get Courtois is Hugo Lloris. Because he's got the personality, because he's got the individual skills. I went to talk to Brad Friedel the other day and asked him to compare all the sort of current goalkeepers, and he said the two quickest off the line are Lloris and De Gea. And he said, you know, he really, obviously doesn't want Lloris to leave Spurs, but he really rates him as a player, and I've seen him internationally in the World Cup, and obviously for Spurs, he's a terrific goalkeeper, but he's not in De Gea's league. De Gea is a very special goalkeeper, and Manchester United and Ed Woodward have to break the bank and do everything. Now, with some players, it doesn't always come down to money. He's got his girlfriend in Madrid. They're all sort of domestic issues, and that the call of Real Madrid is huge. But if they could do a deal where he stayed on another season, because actually, if you had De Gea in there with the players and the type of quality and the cash that the manager's got to spend, actually, it could be quite an exciting season next season.
Does distribution worry you, Lloris? Is that something that Van Gaal looks at goalkeepers and he wants goalkeepers that can have good with distribution? Is that a worry with Lloris?
Yeah, it is a slight worry with Lloris, but you can work on that. I mean, it's also because he's particularly with Spurs, he's not always played with defenders who are comfortable on the ball. You know, Churches and Eric Dyer, you might think twice before rolling the ball to them. So I think that can be worked on. I mean, the most important thing is, you know, if I'm listing De Gea's qualities, I don't actually have distribution in the top three. Although it's a good quality of his, it's his presence, it's his shot stopping, it's his ability. When he makes a good first save, he's so quick to make the second save.
It was one of the things when he first joined, and he got a lot of stick. Was one of the first things people did say was very strong point, but as time's gone on, he's improved, and it's not spoken about as often as distribution. But going on from that, and a season recap as a journalist again, what have been the most exciting grounds you visited this season in terms of atmosphere? Top three.
In the Premier League or
everywhere?
Well, unfortunately, no English teams have gone to Istanbul this season. I haven't gone out with them because I would normally have that. Definitely the Juventus Stadium. and the key thing is, and I'm the son of an architect, so I'm big on this, the best stadiums in terms of atmosphere are invariably designed by architects who have a feel for football. And it's no surprise, two famous Italian architects, one Turin-based, one Rome-based, designed the Juventus Stadium, and one of them is a Juventus season ticket holder. And that is why it's got that atmosphere. That is why it's got the best stadiums are like ravines. So you got that ambush feeling. You got the fans tight on it. I talked to Giggs once. I said, "What's your favourite ground to play at?" And he always said the Dale, because the fans were right on it, particularly as a winger. It's quite nice when you can hear the opposing fans, sort of venom and phlegm almost on your neck, just to sort of drive you on. So Juventus Stadium, I would definitely have there. I love Atletico Madrid Stadium, partly because I like the culture of the club. It seems a club sort of bonded and rooted in the community. And then I would have, partly because I was a kid out there as a schoolboy, and I watched the Bayern Munich teams of the early 80s, late 70s, was the Bayern Munich, the Allianz. I mean, what a stadium that is. Partly because of the fans, because German fans will let rip from all around the ground. They've got that huge, strong culture. Plus also they have an affinity to the club and the team because they're not ripped off financially, as often happens over in English grounds. Partly also because I think if you go to some German grounds, particularly like the Allianz, you want to get into the ground because there's not a lot around outside the ground. The big mistakes that clubs make in this country is building up these huge festival park sites around the ground so people can go and have a sort of hot dog and listen to a band outside the ground. Now that might be nice as a sort of social experience, but it's rubbish for the atmosphere inside the grounds because people stay outside the ground, leave it as late as possible. You want to get the fans into the ground early. That's why Turkish grounds are so great. You don't want to hang around outside the Ali Samiyen or wherever. You want to get in there and experience the atmosphere 3 hours beforehand while they're letting lions loose on the pitch. That's the type of atmosphere you want. So I would definitely say the Allianz is my third.
Before we wrap it up, and on a recap question, apart from Dale, it's an easy one. The best Manchester United player this season.
Been impressed with Ashley Young. I mean, as an England journalist, we've had issues with him down the years. He's been a bit stroppy, but actually, fair play to him. He's had a good season. I like Herrera, partly because one of the reasons I wanted to interview him because I respected him as a player, and I like the way that he's blossomed. He's not a holding midfielder. I quite like that sort of slight right-sided connection between him and Juan Mata. You can just imagine the two of them hanging around museums together and working out how they're going to take on Stoke the following week. There is that sort of Spanish bond there, but I think one of my favourite players, along with Rooney, who hasn't necessarily had his best season, but is ridiculously criticised by some people because I know how important he is and how hard he works and how much he loves the game. But I would put Michael Carrick in there, and I think you've missed him. Now, it's crazy the club of Manchester United's stature and wealth is relying on a 32, 33-year-old player. But players love Carrick because he's just such a nice guy, and because he's such a good player, and because in a way he's a slightly un-English player because he just does the simple things. He gets the ball and he gives it. If you see one of your interesting but slightly madcap central defenders in a sort of Smalling and a Jones out of position, you'll notice Carrick slot back in there, so he keeps the shape. So he's very intelligent, and also I love interviewing him because we always have the same conversation, which basically goes along the line of you can walk down the road and no one really notices you, and you quite enjoy that, and that yet you have got a trophy collection which must be twice the size of Steven Gerrard's house, because of what he's won, and yet he's a lovely, nice, grounded bloke. The type of guy. I mean, I went and interviewed his dad once. I like the family so much because his dad's, was a big Newcastle fan and involved in youth development up there. So I would say Carrick for on-field reasons and off-field reasons.
Piano. Piano. Carrick.
Carrick, the piano. That's right. Yes. Van Gaal said that, didn't he?
No, never.
Oh, it was Neville, that's right. Neville said that. That's right, yes. He's the sort of calming influence. I'm not a big jazz fan, so I wouldn't inflict that epithet on Michael Carrick. But yeah, he is quite soothing. He is quite soothing with all the madness around it. But, it's a long-running thing. I don't need to tell you that, but you've never replaced Paul Scholes.
No.
Best midfielder I've seen, English midfielder I've seen.
Thanks a million, Henry.
Is that all right, mate?
Hi, I'm Paul Scholes and you're watching Stretty News TV.